2025 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field just by simply typing them in, or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, like 12, 13, 14, and also which operating system, that information would be helpful. We will go through all the questions chronologically as asked. I may get behind, and if you don't see kind of a real-time response to your question, we will get through it chronologically as asked, so it may be a little bit of a delay. So if we could avoid asking kind of the same questions repeatedly, that would be appreciated. We should have an index of all of the topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field, as we do with all the live streams. And if you want to search for topics that have been covered, we have over 41,000 topics. You can go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that site. Basically, you just kind of do a search, and you could search through different years of live streams, and it will take you directly there, and you could go directly to the YouTube, to that portion of the Hangout where the question was asked. And we also have two people that serve as moderators. So we have Agent K and Jazz Dude. So they're not Steinberg employees. We do this out of the goodness of our hearts they do this out of their goodness of their hearts to make it a better community experience. We appreciate that. And we'll give an extra special thanks to Jazz Dude for his unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information to the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products. And I'm presenting from outside in the United States, outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. All right, so we see from UDI Audio says, I hope to be able to join, but that was like 2.5 hours ago, so we hope you can make it, or 3.5 hours ago. Andrew Fox says, hi Greg, everyone. I'm not sure if I can make the live stream later, so I'm posting my question early in case I don't get back in time. His question is, importing a track with VariAudio edits from another project does not import the VariAudio even after flattening. I can bounce the track for export, but I prefer to keep it editable if possible. Okay, so let's say we have a VariAudio track here. So we have just kind of looking at our files here. So we listen to it. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate this track version, and when we do that, I'm going to just come over here and bounce selection. So I'm going to do VariAudio edits on this version and leave the original one intact. So I'm going to just double click here. We go to our VariAudio, and let me just take like the first part of this, and I'll make all these kind of very similar in pitch. So we kind of see that we have kind of a nice melodic contour here. So I'm going to take these segments and kind of move them all this first area to the same pitch so that we know that this one has been edited. Okay, so I'm going to now come over. So let's say we listen to this now. If we go back to what our original one was, and we double click, we'd see kind of the melodic contours here. So it's original. And this version is the processed one where we kind of took the first 8 bars and basically moved it all on the same pitch. So I'm going to save this project. All right, we'll call it VariAudio export. Okay, I'm going to go to a new project and we'll create empty, and I'm going to import that vocal track from the VariAudio export project. So I'm going to say import tracks from project. As we do this, we'll say our VariAudio export, which we just made. We'll take our VariAudio track and we'll see what happens. Okay, so now when I come over here, all of my VariAudio looks like it's intact, so all of my changes, so I could still kind of come over here and make changes. Let's see if we switch to our first version, and then I'll double click. We could see the original VariAudio before we did edits. So if you choose to flatten the file, and we could just kind of come over here and, you could choose to, like, let's say if we've done our changes, like we've done here, and then we choose to flatten the real-time processing, what that's doing is basically, we could think of that as like burning in or rendering the VariAudio edits to the particular file. So I wouldn't do that unless you know that you're absolutely sure that if you want it to be editable afterwards, as you mentioned. So make sure, if you do that, then you kind of have burned in you've frozen in all of the VariAudio edits into the particular event so that you can't undo it. But it looks like just simply, importing the track from that session automatically retained all of the VariAudio edits so that we could still work with it. So if you get back on the live stream, let me know if that makes sense for you, Andrew. All right, so we see from Watch Addicts 12, Mark Metter. From Little Rock, Arkansas, says Mac OS Monterey interface is Steinberg UR824. Used a regular mic, no phantom. We plugged it into yours. Channel 1, 100 times. Connectable Cubase 12 audio track, always no problem. Recorded just fine. Today, same setup, but mic placed in front of a bass speaker cabinet. Mic is picking up nothing. So routing problem in Cubase. I'm not sure how could you hit a few high points as to the channel settings, monitor buttons, etc. PS, the mic checks fine, is broadcasting over RPA through the UR824. All right, so I would make sure, one, that if you go to your audio connections and go to your inputs, first make sure that when you do this, that you go to your studio setup and you see the audio system, that you see the Steinberg UR824 driver there. So if it's a different driver, then it's not going, then Cubase is not utilizing the UR824 as the audio interface. So make sure that that didn't switch. If the UR824 is selected there, I would go to the audio connections and go to the input tab. And here we could just make sure that your input 1, we'll say, okay, I'm just doing a mono input. And we'll call this bass mic. All right. And then make sure that this is actually set for the correct input, probably input 1 where your microphone is connected. If that is set, make sure you come over. You will see in the mix console, you will see different red faders. So as soon as and these are the input channels. If you don't see the input channels, you can click on this icon just to the right of kind of the magnifying glass to search, and make sure that the input channels are actually enabled. And when you do that, you could see as signal is coming in, you could see if signal is coming into the input channels here. So so that way you know that the audio interface and the software are communicating with each other. And when we go to add an audio track, we want to make sure that that particular input, so let's say, we call this bass mic, which is say input 1 on our audio interface, that input is assigned. And make sure also that you have the track record enabled and monitor enabled. But you should see it here if there's no tracks that are assigned to record that bass mic. You should still see it in the input in the mixer here. So check those things. Make sure that the interface is set up. If the interface is set up, make sure that the input is properly routed in the audio connections. And if that's set up, check in the mix console to make sure that you're seeing signal there. And you could also check the UR824 mixer. From the UR824, if you see this here, but it's not getting to the channel, make sure that you have the correct input. The track is monitored and record enabled. So try those things, and I bet you could find a culprit within one of those. All right, we see Jazz Dude on. Always great to see him on. So appreciate all of his help. We see Stefan from Sweden. Just saying hi to Jazz Dude. We have Blue Jay Tower joining from Cameroon. Thanks for being part of the community today. We have Uno Memento saying hi from rainy Finland. Yeah, we have rain here as well. We have Johnny 007 checking in from Germany. Thanks for being here. We see Alexander Plasko from Connecticut. Says, hello, Greg. Can you show us where the files or instrument effects picks are in the right zone MediaBay? They still show up after being deleted or uninstalled. A rescan doesn't delete them. Okay, so let me just, it's always like a really kind of like one of those more obvious areas. I'm not sure if you're on Mac or PC, but I think if we come over, let me just, okay, so it might be under Documents, Steinberg, and VST Thumbnails. And this is where the particular thumbnails are. So that's where it is on a Mac. So I think it would be kind of a very similar location if you're on Windows. But again, just go to your Documents folder and look under Steinberg and then under VST Thumbnails. And that's where the VST thumbnails are. All right, so we see Jan from Cubase Index on. We have VS Terra Nova joining from Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Wonderful to see Kerwin Young. He's teaching, or is it at UNC, Kerwin? Teaching a hip-hop class. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we have Soren checking in from Sweden. We see John Costigan saying thanks to Greg, Jazzy at Agent K, and to Jan, and he wants to welcome everyone in Cubase Nation. We have Anthony Clark saying hi. All right, so we have Yisrael Malachi, just says his work right now, watching from Reagan National Airport, Crystal City, Virginia. So I'm just 2 turns away from you, so I'm about 10 miles away from the airport. So thanks for joining. Let me know if you live in the Washington, D.C. area. I'm just right off the George Washington Parkway, which is the road that kind of goes along the Potomac River to the right to the airport. All right, we see Balsa joining from Montenegro. All right, and we see Flyv joining from Winnipeg. Great to see you, Vince. All right, so we have Yak Martin joining from Germany. We see Pastoral Apologetics, just says grateful to have Greg show us the ropes and remind us of the various features of this robust software. All right, we see Roland Stuff joining from Sussex in England. All right, so we have Balsa, just says, it says, I want to have two different transport settings as presets. Does the settings link to workspace preset or some other preset profiles depending on a project? I can recall one or the other setting. By transport settings, I mean different play project range and start mode settings. So they're generally like the transport functions aren't going to they aren't going to be like included, like the state of the transport aren't going to be included directly with like a workspace, but a lot of those functions you could actually just just trigger from different keyboard shortcuts. So let's say if I want to create, let me just get my MIDI remote out. So if I want to create a scenario with where we change the transport settings, I'm going to use like a MIDI remote, but we could also use a keyboard shortcut for this. So I'm going to go to my MIDI remote settings. All right, so let's say I want to come over here. Let's go to our transport. And I'm just going to assign a particular button. So let's go to start mode. All right, so now that I have this particular button, I could just hit the start mode button and it would automatically just cycle between the different start modes. And you'll see that this icon, as I hit that, we could actually see what the particular start mode is right there. So that one button, you can just kind of cycle between different start modes, whether it's from a MIDI remote or using a keyboard shortcut. So it's not preserved within, we can think of the workspaces as being more for like the, what windows and content of Windows, but we could just change the start mode there. And let me, so it's not necessarily preset. So let's say, okay, so, and let's say play project range. So I want to come over here. Let's assign this to, and you could probably just say play, let's see if we do play project range. Okay, so if you have, so I'm not sure if your locators are set, but let's say if I wanted to take my left and right locators here, let me just get the name of the function, but if you want it, so let's just come over. Just see if we can find it in the MIDI remote here again. So we'll see play selection range. So I could just simply come right over here, assign that particular mapping to play selection range. So now when I do that, so I could switch between my different start modes here, and I could just say play selection range. I just just have a bunch of random files here that don't make any musical sense together. So you could just simply program buttons to do that, or key commands. So if you have a MIDI remote, you could do that. And again, just coming over here, that will allow you to switch between the different start modes like that. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right. See Sean McLeod just checking in from Virginia. What part of Virginia are you in? Just out of curiosity. So I'm in Alexandria, between Old Town Alexandria and Mount Vernon. All right, Rob Schmedeke from Tarpon Springs says, "Hi Greg, I have 8 tunes mixed for a client and they asked for a CD to be burned. Can you give me a quick overview on how to drop these into WaveLab elements and prepare / burn them to CD? Thanks, G." All right, so let's come over here. Okay, so we're going to open up WaveLab. It's going to be really kind of the same procedure on Pro or Elements. Let me see if I could just open up Elements here. Might be able to open up just the Elements version. Sometimes holding down the Option or Alt key. No. All right, so I believe the procedure would be the same. So we're going to come over here. Let's create empty. All right, so when we come to, we're going to make a new audio montage, and we'll probably make it like, 16-bit 44.1 stereo. It's pretty typical. Okay, and then you'll see an album wizard right up here. So you'll see an album tab in the upper left-hand corner. So here what we want to do is go to the album wizard. Let's see. Okay, so first I'm going to just right-click here. And let's insert audio files. And I'm going to just say we're going to browse. Let me just see if I have. The folder I was thinking of. All right, I'll just. All right, so let's say this is, I want these particular files in, okay? All right, so here we can put them onto tracks. So right click, navigate to the files. You can put them all on a single track if you want, or you could alternate, doesn't matter. And now that we have these particular tracks, we want to go to Album Wizard and say apply, and this will automatically kind of put the particular all the CD metadata. It will put a pause between your different tracks, and at this point, so you could do your editing for your transition. So if you want it 2 seconds of pause or whatever you need it, you could do fade in, fade outs, you could do processing. But at this point, if you just go to the functions, and you'll actually just, if you will just click kind of right here, it'll just ask you, I don't have a CD drive currently on my MacBook, but you could just kind of come right over here. You'll see this little icon, and then that will allow you to burn the CD. So create an audio montage, right click, insert all the audio files, go to the Albums tab, go to Functions, make the album wizard, and this will make it all Redbook compliant. And at that point, you could just choose to write audio CD or write a DDP file, or just come right over here and you can click on this particular icon, which will do the same thing. So a DDP is kind of like the data file. It's a disk description protocol, and that's kind of the data file of what an audio CD is. So if you needed to email a DDP file to like a duplication house, you can just simply do that right there. And so let me know if that makes sense for you, Rob. Great to see you on. Hope you're well. Okay. All right, we see Michael Teams checking in from Weatherford, Texas. All backwards is just saying, what's up, guys? All right, so we have Adam checking in from Essex in the UK. He's looking forward to the show. So curious if you know Nick, who's also in Essex. Probably like saying someone that lives in a city of 1 million people, if the two people know each other. But Nick is a longtime attendee here. All right, we see Fly V's as parents, but he brought his PC in his studio bag over there. All right, so we see from Jakarta says, hello, how do I keep a track playing when I'm recording a new track to comp? So if you're, let me just, I think a comping example. Let me see if it's still my recent. Yeah. You know, so if you are comping, so let's say like here I have a number of different comps that we've done. So like let's say I have this, so I have this in the cycle mode, and if I come over here, I'm just going to hit record. So I recorded like several different passes, and we could select our different comp takes by clicking on the little hand tool, which is the comp tool. So let's say I want to do another recording. I would just come over here. So I have my drums playing, and I want to do new take. So I would just hit record. And then as it's recording, we could hear our drums. And we can see this is our new take here. So if I was recording my bass again, we would hear it and see it here. And then the next lane, we still hear the drums. We probably don't want to hear the bass, because if we're kind of continuing to play those parts, we don't want to play and hear the part that we just recorded. So those automatically get muted. And now we come back one more cycle. And now again, we hear what is being recorded. You know, if the track is monitored. And every time we do that, we just see a new lane appear. And to kind of choose between our different lanes, all we would have to do is just kind of come right over here. So let's say when this is done, so I'm going to stop the recording at the end of this pass. All right, so now I could just play and say, okay, I want to hear. So we could just, instead of having to kind of select and mute and cut, we could have one tool that kind of allows us to do that just by kind of clicking and dragging over. And then we could have this part from that take, this part from this take, etc. And if you want to select a different one, but anytime that you record, you'll just see kind of new lanes appear below. So let me know if that's helpful. Hang on one second. All right. We see Mark Rabin on from Montana. Everyone give a big woof to Stella, Mark's dog. Woof. All right, we have a question from Adam. It says, when I used a piano roll editor, I'm unable to write events smaller than a 16th, regardless of snap. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so let me I'll just put in some, okay, so let's say I'll put in 8th notes, 16th notes. So I'm going to come over here and we'll start with, make it a little easier. Okay, so let's say our quantized value, so we'll just go to our quantized panel so we could see it here. It's set to 8th note, so I'm going to put in a series of 8th notes. All right, and let's move this to 16th notes. All right, so now we want to draw notes in. I'm going to take it off of my cycle. Okay, so we can see that this is, I'll start here. Let's just put in 16th notes again. So we have that as kind of a visual reference. Okay, so take this off. So let's go ahead and I'll just draw in some notes and see if we could draw in. So we have kind of like our 16th notes here. So here I could I'll just quantize all these here. Okay, so we can see that we have 16th notes. Kind of now, it could also be like, so when I go to draw in a particular note, here I could draw in. All right, so this maybe, let's take a look at, if we go to kind of our advanced quantize, let me just, all right, so let's set our I think that there may be a link. But there might be just a length quantized setting. So let me just. All right, let me just open up the quantized panel here. So I want to say that there is a way to have the length not tied. So let's say if I set this to 64th notes, all right, bear with me just for a quick second. So say if we want to, right, so now even with that at 64th notes, it's still, right, so I'm going to turn off the, all right, so if you turn the snap off here, or hit the letter J, then you could draw in any rhythmic note length. All right, let me just, there should be kind of a length quantize. This is what I'm looking for. Sorry about that. All right, so let's set our length quantize here to 30-second notes. And now I'm going to enable snap. So make sure right click that length quantize is turned on. Then you could see that you could draw in a 64th note. So as we draw in notes, now it's going to be determined by this rate. So now if I draw in 128th note, so check just to make sure that the length quantize is enabled. And then you can just simply come over here. So that's kind of an independent settings. So you could just click right over here and have your different values that are for the rhythmic length. So then you could set that to 30-second notes, 64th notes, or 128th notes by default. So if we kind of look at, we can see that we'll have. So just make sure the length quantize is set, and then you should be all good to go with that. Sorry for my brain cramp with that. Okay, so you see from Andrew Fox says, thanks for the VariAudio answer, Greg. You did exactly the same as me, but my edits were missing on import. Must be a specific project for some reason. I'll try a new one and make sure it works as expected. Yeah, so let me know what you find. but make sure that you don't do the flatten processing, because that basically will burn into VariAudio editing. All right, so we see Balsa just says, thanks, Greg. Even better and faster solution with the MIDI remote shortcut. All right, so we have CD FM just says, hello, I'm from Germany. Thanks for joining us today. I see Mark Rabin is saying hi to Kerwin and Rollins and Pastoral Apologetics, Jan, JC, and Jazz Dude, who he calls the man, and of course Greg, who is not a cyborg. All right. Chatfield just jumped. Okay, so we see from Tim K, says there's a question regarding transport controls. I have my awesome Logic keyboard Astra that I use a Cubase IC Pro, somewhat configurable, or one of my MIDI controllers as workflow options. Yeah. All right, so we see from CDFM just says I love Cubase. All right, so you see Mark Raven just says Stella is upstairs, but she will hear and come to the desk/studio soon. Oh, she's on the way now. Yeah, so I think my cat Steven's taking a nap somewhere else today. He sometimes likes to come and sit on my couch, little couch in my office. All right. All right, so Yak Martin says the random sound started when he hit like. All right. All right, so we see from Alexander Plasko says thanks, Greg. It's in the same place on PC for the VST thumbnails. Okay, see, great quote from Mark Rabin. Just see from just Tim K just says, "Too old to noodle ought to be a T-shirt on a guy at the guitar store." And Mark Rabin says, "I hope the guy at the guitar store is under 25 because that's who gets more money from working at the music store. Networking is priceless." Yeah. All right, so we see from Edge Buyers, says, hi, Greg, Edge here from Las Vegas. I have Windows 11, Apollo Twin USB interface, Cubase 14 Pro, and Autotune version 10. How do I use Autotune while recording but still being able to remove the plugin? All right, so if you're recording with Autotune on, so there's two different approaches. One is if you go... So I'm not sure if you have the Autotune version, it's being kind of powered by the hardware, or if it's just a software version. But I would tend to, what I would do, there's two different ways. One is you could record the Autotune signal in. Sometimes that, but you can't undo it. Or you could have the raw signal be played back through the Autotune plugin. So if you want to record and burn the Autotune processing into the file that can never be undone, you could just come to the input channel of the mixer. And again, if you don't see the input channel, sometimes it could be filtered. Click right over here and you can see the red faders to the left are generally the input channels. So if we go to the input channel and we put the Autotune plugin here, I'll just open up like the pitch correct plugin that comes with Cubase. So this is kind of like you could use this as a real-time pitch correction. So you could do that, and that will burn the plugin processing into the particular file. So it's applied. You can't undo that processing. All right. Now, if you want the ability to maybe edit it in VariAudio or do other processing, what most people would do is keep the recorded path dry, and then on the channel we can come over here and just put it in as an insert effect. Now you may not hear it if your audio interface, so if we have like our pitch correct plugin here, and you could substitute your Autotune, and for this I think you could get the Autotune Live, which has lower latency as opposed to the other one. So if you run the non-live version, the latency may be a little distracting for the person you're recording. And if you don't hear the effect when you're doing this, you may have to go to your audio interface. So if you go to your studio menu to studio setup, and when you select your audio interface, just make sure direct monitoring is unchecked, because when you're recording, it's actually, and direct monitoring is on, it's actually taking the input directly to the output of the audio interface and not utilizing any of the software plugins. So if you want to hear it, make sure that is unchecked. Then you're playing back an audio file that you could run in a plugin or do, more extensive audio, like pitch correction using Autotune if you have that, or VariAudio, so you could do kind of more offline pitch correction. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Eddie, and thanks for joining us today. All right, so you see from Roland stuff says, hi Greg, regarding CD burning a WaveLab, you showed presumably you could drag the positions of alternate tracks to create a crossfade that would be created at that pre-burn stage. Would that work? Thanks. Yeah, and you could even do it on the same track as well. So let's say if we'll open up WaveLab here real quick. So we'll just create an audio montage here. All right, so a lot of mastering engineers like to see it stacked. I like having everything on one track. It could be just my legacy way of thinking of CDs. So again, if I come over here, I want to take all these, and we'll get asked, and we could say, okay, I want to line them all up. So at this point, if we wanted to do crossfades between different clips for CD, like, okay, maybe I want no pause here. I could, very easily come over here and say, okay, we could select different clips, and then we could just say, okay, I want this clip to start, so at this point, within the montage, you could just say, okay, I want to have a fade in or fade out, or I want this clip. And the cool thing with the montage is, let's say, okay, I want these two to automatically do crossfades. So if I want to have kind of seamless, even if it's on the same track, I don't have to instigate a crossfade. It will just, when two events in the montage are overlapped, they will just kind of automatically crossfade. So now I could just kind of come over here, do the crossfade as I see fit, and move the timing of different tracks so I could have kind of the pauses and sequences as desired. So you don't necessarily have to, and then but if you start here, you could also just say stagger to different lanes, and here you could, just do fade ins and fade outs as well. And you can see it'll do like kind of the real-time crossfade because it's on one single track, but you could just have kind of staggered visually on lanes. So either way. Okay, Algis Ramanowskis asks, "Hi Greg, please tell the guys at Steinberg that dialogue transcription is engaged in more than 3 hours of length of dialogue. Audio data processing, Nuendo Mac crashes every time. Thank you." I'll pass it along. Yeah, are you doing a feature more than 3 hours? I know usually people are kind of working on, smaller scenes and stuff like that, but I'll make sure to pass it along. Okay, next question we see InDrop says, "Hi Greg, is it possible to open the MediaBay in a right zone with a keyboard shortcut?" So we could do so let's come over here and say we want to have our MediaBay. So I'm going to just come over, let's do like a MIDI remote mapping here. Okay, so let's see if we could just assign. All right, let's see if we could just. So I know that we could open and close. Let's see. All right, so now that I have this, I could turn on and off the right zone. Then I think if you just, let's say we turn on and off the zone, and then I think we can navigate in the zone. So I'll just come over here. Let's see if it's this. Yeah, so you may not be able to, so let's say I want this to be previous zone. So we could open the page. So let's say if you want that there, and then we could just navigate to the MediaBay, just kind of going left and right tab. So that way we could just kind of navigate like so. So, and if you want the zone gone, so this will open up the left and right zone, and then you could have 2 keys or 2 keyboard shortcuts that will automatically allow you to kind of navigate within your MediaBay as well. So let me know if that's helpful, but I don't think we could call up the MediaBay and call up that particular zone. We can navigate within the zone. Let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we see Val, who's still in the session, just saying hi for a second and sending greetings. All right, Bratman Studio says, hey, Cubase Cats Kittens just got in. What did I miss? All right. We gave away the Yamaha DM7 console earlier. Just kidding. All right, Anthony Clark's question. I have a Windows 11 i7, 32 gigs of RAM, a Project 11 tracks, 4 groups, and 3 effects channels. I have the plugins on the groups and effects, and ASIO is already at 98% red. Buffer size is at 228, 2048 using UAD. How to split the project to another project to finish the work. I can't even work on the project while the computer is clean. Should I print stems? What is the best way to split the process? All right, so, one of the things that you could always do is just to make sure that, in Cubase, so when you go to your studio menu, you could check out kind of your audio performance monitor here. So as we would play, this may give you, and you'll see kind of if you do run into particular instances, this could show you, freeze that, it could show you which tracks are causing problems and which tracks are not, that could point out tracks that are causing problems, and it may say, okay, have you considered freezing this particular track? Now, sometimes when you have multiple plugins, and we'll show this again, just a quick audio performance example. And I think every DAW works the same way, because if you have let's say, one track is going through, 16 plugins, then that one track could only do processing on one CPU core. So let's say if I look at this, we have 8 tracks of audio with this one delay plugin. I chose this delay plugin because it has a number of different plugins within the plugin. So here we're basically running 9 plugins within one particular plugin. So if I put this on 8 different tracks, so we're running 8 instances of that plugin, but everything is now basically going on one particular track. So each track can address a different CPU processing core. If we have one track that has 8 of the plugins, you think logically, oh, it's going to be the same. We're running 8 plugins here, we're running 8 plugins. But since we're running 8 plugins on a single track, at that point, you might, it's only going to be able to utilize one processor for that. So if we look at, because everything has to be processed serially. So let's open up our audio performance meter. And we look at our audio performance here, and I'll just turn this down because it's just kind of set up to not make audible sense, but we play our 8 tracks. And we can see that as we're doing this, we have, very, low CPU usage. All right, so so this is 8 tracks, and each of these tracks is running one instance of this particular plugin. Same preset. So I'm going to take those particular tracks there, and I'm going to disable the particular tracks. So I'm going to right click on the tracks. Let's disable the selected tracks, and let's enable this track. Now this track has 8 of those plugins on a single track. Okay, so when I play this now, so we can see we have the same number of plugins, but this is all on a single track where it's only utilizing one CPU core. And let me just take off one preference here. So if your project is set up, so realize that, you know, if you have like a track with 6 heavy plugins and that's being sent to a group that has 4 heavy plugins, that's being sent to a master section that has a couple of heavy plugins, that one track can only utilize one CPU core. So if you have the ability in your project, 1, to render files, or 2, to just, you know, be able to maybe, okay, I want this track to go through these processes. Maybe I want to freeze the inserts on that track. You know, you could choose to freeze the track, and that would free up a lot of different CPU resources as well. So realize that putting all of your different inserts on one track, you know, so you could have one track that could totally, you know, decimate your CPU. If you load up every heavy plugin on that single track, but running the same number of plugins on different tracks, you know, that will be able to spread the processor, you know, the multi-processing across different cores much easier. And as Jazz Dude mentioned, check out the latency mon and make sure that your audio interface, that your audio computer is kind of optimized. All right, I see you've done that. Yeah, so Anthony Clark, to see if you actually kind of, you know, render a particular track. And if you open up the audio performance window, you could probably get, probably give you suggestions on what you could do to kind of, you know, when you go to the dropouts, what you could do to actually make sure that that is, you know, like different strategies to help with your processing. All right, so we see from FlyV says I have multiple laptops and I leave a Buster one here at my parents', then my new Windows 11 Studio PC. What are your thoughts on traveling with my new Windows 11? So I've been just, I have traveled for 30 years with, probably 33 years with laptops for work. Pretty much all of my work machines, because I used to, before kind of COVID, I was kind of, the travel, fly 120,000 miles a year guy and fly out to do a demo or a presentation somewhere. So, I had no problems, running Cubase on laptops. So I don't think, so if you want to work, and especially with the licensing now, you could have it on 3 different computers, but just be careful with your laptop. Make sure you don't lose your laptop, that it doesn't get stolen. Get a good bag. I was always like really particular with my bags, and make sure that that it's not just like a sleeve that if you drop it, because inevitably if you're traveling a lot, it could just be in, you throw it on the back seat of a car, you come to a sudden stop, and then the bag is on the floor. So that could mess up laptops, but, treat it very gently. And I think, your laptop can last for a long time. All right, Yak Martin asks, theoretical question, can I run into problems sending vocals through Cloner, then Vocal Strip? So I think you're fine. So let's go ahead and we'll just try it here real quick. Okay, so let's say we have this little vocal.
Day after day after, I feel the weight.
All right, so we'll come over here.
In light we lay.
So say, okay, we want to make it sound like it's going to be 4 voices.
Day after.
So now we'll come over here to
day after.
try something a little.
Day after.
So you figure this is basically like for like a multi-band imager chorusing, and then you have like another on this patch one, like yeah, 14 different processes on this plugin all in one track. So yeah, you could definitely do it without issue. All right, so we see Anthony Clark just says, I know that function, but the about of the plugins is not crazy, and ASIO is already choked. So try disabling like each track, and see like just by right clicking, if you select multiple tracks here. And at that point, you could choose to disable all of the tracks and then just enable them one by one and see if you could find kind of the culprit. It could be one plugin that's just overloading a particular track, and it could seem like something innocuous, and maybe the plugin hasn't been optimized for contemporary processors or something like that. But just make sure that you're so try disabling. And then just one by one, add in different tracks. You could add one at a time and start by adding one track, next track, and see where, I bet you could determine which track is, it's probably going to be one particular track that's doing it. And then, if it's still not cleared, you could disable. And if we go to the master section here, like on our master fader, if you have plugins or your group channels, so if we have particular plugins, you could come over here. So there's a way that you could kind of bypass plugins. So bypass plugins, when we just click here and turn them off, they still take the same CPU power, and they still take the same they still impose the same latency. So instead of just bypassing them, you could disable by holding down the Alt or Option key on a particular plugins, and that will disable the plugins. And then once the plugins are disabled, that unloads it from audio performance and different latency. So try disabling the plugin, try disabling, like the tracks one at a time. And then if everything is, and then you could also disable all the plugins that you have on your groups and your master section. So there's probably going to be one plugin that's the culprit that's misbehaving for you. All right, Mark Rabin is sharing that today is the Pythagorean theorem day, 9/16/25. Sound notated. He was always the interesting scientist to me when I was a kid, just because he was, figuring out scientific relationships of musical principles. All right, we see Brian Sawyer checking in from Yuma, Arizona. Thanks for being online with us. Tim K is just saying to Mark Raven that nerdy math things should never be held back. All right, we see Charles K on. Is this question? Sorry. Sorry, my chat field just jumped. Okay, so Charles' question. I'm trying to open an old project which I know is recorded at 44.1. When I try to open it, I don't get the convert dialog. Cubase hangs. Any idea why this is? Try changing the sample rate prior. So if it's an old project, maybe it's a plugin that's hanging. So what you could try to do, Charles, and it's great to see you on, is maybe come over and, if it's not opening, if it's hanging, so it may not be a sample rate issue. So let me just reread. It says, when I try to open, I don't get the convert dialog. Cubase hangs. So a lot of times Cubase, if, like I switch back and forth between projects that are 44.1 and 48K all the time. So, unless your audio interface is told specifically not to do that, then your interface, most interfaces will just kindly switch back and forth and not give you kind of a notice. But what you can do, so it's probably not the sample rate that's causing the project to not open. Maybe it's an older plugin. I would try to, go to a new project. We'll do an empty. Come over here and you want to import tracks from project. Select that particular project. And now we could just come over here. You could try to add all of the tracks into the new project and see if that works. If you still kind of get it hanging, at that point, try just adding 8 tracks at a time and see, but it's probably maybe going to be like referencing an old plugin that's no longer on your system, something along those lines, I think. All right. All right, so we just see from Hucking Restaurant, just says, can we hear it? So let me know if what you want to hear. And it's probably from 35 minutes ago, so sorry about that. All right, so we see all right, so you see from Anthony Clark, says, I do that when it's morning have. When it starts to show the plugins, it's causing it. But I mean, the project is not that big. Also, the plugins are few, not 16 plugins in a channel, of course. It could be if you have, a plugin that's going into a group. So let's say, if you have, channel EQ, channel strip, a couple of inserts, that's going into a group that has a couple of inserts that's going to the master bus. All of those plugins are kind of in the same serial path. So just be aware of that. All right, so you see Adam says regarding MIDI note lengths. That's great, thanks. Sorry, it took me a while to get there. All right, Michael Teams giving kudos to Jazz Dude for his great Discord and moderation, and has given Jazz Dude 1 gallon of chocolate ice cream. Okay, Balsa asks, is this possible with the macro / project logical editor? Select a track, then shortcut opens insert effects, insert effects section box menu for first, next empty insert slot. So I could type in an effect I want to apply to that track. So I don't think we could navigate to a particular slot. But I'll take a look. So let's go ahead and add an audio track. All right. So we could open up specific insert slots with key commands, but I don't think that we could say go to next. Go to first empty slot, but yeah, so there's no key command. Let me see if we could do it in a project logical editor. I'll just put a couple of okay, so let's give it a shot. Yeah, I don't know of a way to. I'll just take another look here. So let's say. Yeah, so we could enable the insert slots. We could bypass the inserts or sends, but no way to select kind of the next open, like the next open insert slot that I know of. I'll see if I can do some more research between now and Friday, see if I can find something, but I currently don't know a way. You see, Michael Teams is granted Uno Memento 1 gallon of Starry Night ice cream. Sounds like good flavor. And Brian Sawyer's received 1 gallon of Heavenly Hash ice cream. And Bratman Studio Rick has received 1 gallon of Texas Fresh Strawberry. Rocky Road Ice Cream to Mark Rabin. All right. All right. And Yak Martin is asking Michael Teams for what his favorite pizza topping is, and we've learned that it's pepperoni and jalapeno pizza. Sounds like a good future trivia question. All right. All right, Balsa asks, are there any console channel strip effects in Cubase? Let me clear my throat. So none that's like, oh, this is an API, this is a Neve, this is SSL. So a lot of them, like Steinberg did like the VST plugins for the only ones that were actually, authorized by Rupert Neve, Yamaha and Steinberg did those, but that was kind of a special thing, but it's not necessarily included. So just like a Neve console doesn't sound like the Steinberg console, and the Steinberg console doesn't necessarily have the same flavor as an SSL, etc., or API or an MCI or whatever. But you could get come over and and someone who worked on large format consoles, so when we come over here, we could just say, okay, I want to have, like every channel, you can have your channel strip where it's going to be 4 bands of parametric EQ with separate high cut, low cut phase. We could have your noise gate. We could have 3 different compression stages. So if you want a tube or a vintage compressor, you can just simply kind of come over here. You have a de-esser or an envelope shaper for transient. Multiple 3 types of saturation, including like tape saturation, magneto 2, tube saturation, and 3 limiters. And the fact that you could kind of just change all these around and change the signal flow or swap the signal flow of the inserts with the channel strip, so that you could just come over here and pick which. So I've never seen a console that was like that flexible, so we don't want to necessarily limit the functionality that our users tend to expect by following just a paradigm or graphic images from a console. So there's a lot of things that say they model consoles that don't sound like consoles. It was always interesting, meeting Rupert Neve and, how disappointed he was that so many plugins kind of bore the likeness of gear that he designed, because he felt that none of them actually met his expectations except for like the Yamaha Steinberg Neve Portico plugins. So it doesn't have like an API or Neve or an SSL or Trident kind of channel strips, but the channel strips what you have is far more capable than any of those consoles. All right, so Tim K just says, it's a new thing I learned, the WaveLab crossfade thing. How hard was that 30 years ago? So it was really hard, but I think probably you could do it 25 years ago. I think it came out in WaveLab version 3 with the montage editor. So. All right, so Yak Martin is peppers and peppers, extra Tabasco maybe, nothing beats shrimps, garlics, and onions here. All right, Michael Teams is granted Kerwin Young 1 gallon of Texas 2-step ice cream. So we see Alexander Plasko says, Greg, can you demonstrate how to write a simple script modulator? So I haven't really written one. I tend to use like kind of the built-in ones. And to me, it's like crosses into the line of software development where I get like really software dumb. So I may be able to have something kind of that makes sense on Tuesday, but for those that aren't familiar with it, if you want to go to the modulators, that when we want to change like a particular parameter, we could set up our modulator and we could just say, okay, I want to have that button kind of move all the time. And we have different forms of modulators where we could say, so you could have different modulation shapes, but you could also say, okay, I want this to follow the envelope of something, but there is a mod scripter, and a lot of times, there are several of these, like if you load up presets, so let's say we want to do like, linear quantizers. So I think if we go to the script editor, so I'm not a software developer at all. So, some people, this is like very basic coding. I think some people have told me that they just kind of put it into like an AI coding and we're able to kind of do this type of functions. But this isn't really kind of my area of expertise. But I could see if I could create something, but often, like, my wife didn't study software development, but she did it when she was younger, and she just, would look at stuff like this and then just kind of substitute and kind of make her own additions to it and modifications and kind of see the logic of doing it. I don't have the right type of mindset, or I haven't really experimented with that, but I can see if I could come up with something simple. So this allows you to create your own modulators. So with different conditions. So maybe open up, there are presets for it, and you could maybe kind of understand the logic of it. I could see if I could figure something out for Friday's live stream to show how to do it a little bit. But if you've done software development, it probably makes sense to you. I'm just always a software user. So we see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo saying hello, Greg, to all Cubase contributors for the help with Cubase over all the years. We see Jazzy has shared a bunch of mod scripter scripts. Michael Teams is on fire with ice cream distribution today. All right, Terry Gray asks, hey Greg, can you show me how to route a reference track through the control room so that it doesn't hit my 2-mix processing? So yeah, great to see you on, Terry. Hope you're well. See if we still have this project to use for this. All right, so let's say we have kind of our project here. And way at the bottom, we're going to have, there's a mix down file, and I'm going to come over here. Let's make this sound much different. I'm going to put a nasty EQ on it. Okay, so a lot of times when we're doing a mix, we may have like our 2-mix processing. So like on our stereo out or stereo bus, we can have processing here. Now, when we're doing a reference mix and we have a reference mix that's playing, we don't want that reference mix has probably already been mastered, and we don't want this audio track to go through our stereo output here, but we still want to be able to kind of to switch back and forth. So we want to hear this track without any of our master 2-mix processing, and I want to hear that in comparison to my mix, which probably has processing on it. So I'm going to select, import the reference track. At this point, we want to on the routing page, we just want to send it to no bus. Okay, so this is not sending out here. We could open up the channel if you want, and let's go to our Q sends. So we see our sends here and our Q sends. I'm going to come over here and let's set it to, and I've created a reference track. When we go to my studio menu, I come over into my control room, I added a Q mix. So if we come over here, I'll just delete this. So if you right click over here, we're just going to add a Q mix, and you have 4 different Q mixes, and you could label them. So I called the first one reference. Okay. So what I want to do is this track is now not going into our stereo out, but it is going to our reference. And I want to set this level at 0 dB so I'm not adding or taking gain away. So when we come over here, let's say we play. Now in the control room, I can come over here. Let's go to Q1. Let's go check one quick preference here. Okay. So I could listen to this. Now when you go to Q1, I'm going to come over. And now what you could do is just simply come right over here and just switch between your Q mix and your mix just by kind of clicking right over here. So you could just say, okay, now I'm listening to the mix. Now I'm listening to the reference track right here from this particular Q mix. So again, this Q mix, this track is going out to the Q mix, and that way you could just go back and forth between the reference track and your mix track right there. All right. Okay, just reading through comments. All right, so you see Michael Teams just says, howdy Greg, thanks for the great hangout. I learned so much, 1 gallon of banana nut bread ice cream. Oh, that's a good flavor. Thank you. That's a good one. All right. Tim K is discussing, I guess, different band names. So Perspective Hammer. That's a good one. All right, so you see Wilfried from Germany says just installed Cubase 9 Pro. All right. Great to see you on. All right, and Yak Martin is suggesting the name Duran Duran Duran. So I had a colleague of mine at Yamaha played in kind of an 80s karaoke band. I think they were Mr. Miyagi from Karate Kid and Mr. So that's a good, clever name. All right. All right, so you see Fly V just says it just got a new bag that's safe and durable for laptops and travel. That's great news, Greg. Thanks. Yeah, and I still kind of always I just got a new bag a couple months ago. Like I think it was a Targus, and I always like want to make sure like when I travel, I always I have certain priorities like. I have to have a zippered key inside the bag that can't get accidentally opened, like to put my car keys in. So just to make sure like I don't travel to Europe and leave my car keys in Hamburg or something like that. So all right, so we see Balsa has a feature request. Range selection tool can move volume, pan automation, lines, but can't move the line if it's for bypass enable automation, where the line all the way down means off, all the way up is on. All right, so we'll take a quick look. Okay. But it can't move the line if it's for bypass enable automation. Okay, so let's say if I come here, we can so if it's like a scenario, let me know if it's a scenario like this or maybe like mute. If you want to so let's say if I want to, if it's kind of in bypass mode here, so if it's kind of like a switch. So let me know if it's that, but I mean, if it's like these types of scenarios, I mean, generally there's, like with mutes and stuff like that, it's going to be primarily kind of like, on or off, but let's see if so let me know if it's like that. I mean, so, but generally with, where there's kind of dynamic values, we could increase or decrease those, but let's see if I guess we could probably just come over here. So if you want to, from the info line, you might be able to change the values there. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding Balsa. Chat field just jumped. Let me find my spot where it was. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. Michael Team says he's always looking for the better button. All right. All right, so we see Anthony Clark just says normal about his audio performance issue. Normal plugins mix. I use latency mon. Says everything's fine. I also cleared the computer cache, etc. I need to see the performance of my computer. Yeah, and if you want to send a project to me, I'd be happy to kind of take a look at it as well. If you want to send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. See, Tim K says he's got a head full of potential band names. So. Okay, wonderful to see Benny from Sweden. See, Brian Sawyer is wondering what the heck is heavenly hash. So I was kind of thinking the same thing. I was thinking like hash and eggs or hash browns or some other illegal substance in some places. All right. Okay, great to see Ted Springman on. Says, hi Greg, I'd like to start cataloging MIDI chord progressions for future compositions. I may simply export MIDI tracks somehow. I'd prefer to assign progressions to MIDI keys to play randomly. Thanks. So yeah, definitely check out like the chord pads if you haven't kind of dived into this yet. So I'll just do a new project here. All right, so let's say if we have we'll just load quick instrument here. Okay, so, you know, you could utilize the chord pads themselves and come over here and just say, and then you could play chords. And if you wanted to, you know, create chords, let's say I want to go here. We could come over and say, okay, let's try. I want this to be a C minor flat 7th with an F sharp and a bass. You know, so we could just come over and you could also just, you know, come over here and say, okay, I want to, you know, input MIDI. Say for this chord, I'm just going to randomly throw my hand down, and then you could, you know, choose to, you know, have that chord automatically captured and populated in here. If we have, and there's lots of different chord progressions that you could have. So say, okay, I come here. And you could, just select all of the chords and say, okay, let's delete all the chords, and then we could just kind of build up. Okay, so say, okay, now I want to play so you could come over here and we could say, okay, my root key, I want this to be, and we could modulate. So that all the progression will be the same, but we could modulate. So you may want to start with the chord kind of at the tonal center there. And then you say, okay, this is and you could choose whether it's going to be playing chords or if you want it to be pattern. So and if you wanted to take any pattern, you could drag and drop the patterns, and that will be the basis for the arpeggios. But coming over, you have kind of a whole chord. So you could say, okay, I want to see my chord editor, or we want to see kind of related chords. So more green is more kind of harmonically related chords to it. You could also see circle fifths for major or minor chords. So you say, oh, I like that one. I want to trigger this chord here. And let's do something. So you could do kind of overall where, if you want to be your circle of fifths, or you want to do straight chord editor, a list. So you could kind of switch to see chords that are maybe not as musically related to your particular key, kind of more outlier chords. And then once you're done here, you could just simply save this as a preset that you could recall at any time. So you could just come over here and make a whole slew of different chord progressions and then write songs using those particular chord progressions. If you have if you have like a particular song, so let's say I import a song. So I'll just import a quick audio file. So let's say, okay, so I want to take this chord here. I'm going to create a chord track. And I could do this with MIDI or audio information. Drag the chords from the track into the chord track, and then we could choose to basically just take those particular chords from the chord track and assign them directly into our, so we can say, so these are the chords that were extracted from a particular song, and then save that as a preset, and you could build up a whole library of chord progressions. Like maybe some days when you're in a creative mode, you just want to come up with chord progressions. Great. And then you could catalog a whole series of chord progressions and then, come back and write songs using those particular chord progressions later and just kind of build up libraries. It's a great way to if you're in a particular creative mode and you just want to do that, but you don't want to necessarily, make your song at that point, you could save those and recall them as kind of starting off points for your song. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Ted. It's great to see you on. Great to see Gareth on from Bilbao, Spain. All right. All right, so we see Randy from Dallas Fort Worth is Radar the Band. Great to see you on. Okay. Michael Teams wants everyone to whack the like button, and Gareth wants people to like that whack button. All right. All right, so we see from Yak Martin, just says modulator quick LFO into Retrologue's LFO, and you could get extra FM. Is it fast enough? So we'll give it a quick shot here. All right, so say if we want to come over here, so let's say if we have our LFO, all right, so say if we all right, so let's say if we want to come over here to the modulator. Yeah, so as we come over here, we could have, like, we can see that that shape is now being kind of triggered from the LFO, so. And then if you wanted to, so you could kind of, and then have that LFO trigger something with inside, so it looks like you could kind of stack your LFOs that way. All right, so Roland Stuff says, just to say that I learned so much from what other Cubasers ask you about, Greg. things I would not otherwise consider when composing, producing, such as the value of this forum. Thanks. Yeah, I think that's, I've learned a lot about Cubase because I've been asked probably a lot of questions on Cubase, but I think it's always a great way to work. Gareth just says, creative thinking is far more important than qualification, especially in this fast-changing world, and ice cream is far more important than anything else. All right, Michael Teens says he had a question but forgot about it, so maybe another one will come in, or another question will trigger your memory for you. All right, so we have Gresham McQuena just saying hello. Thanks for joining us. All right, Gresham asked, does the Cubase 14 trial version have a functionality where you right-click on the MIDI and select the chord track on the Arrange window? Let me just open up a project here. Okay, so let's say we have a chord track that's empty. I'm going to drag. So if I want to take this file, I could drag that file to the chord track, and the chords are automatically determined directly from the MIDI event there. Now, if we have this chord track and we'll say use monitor tracks, and I have this track in monitor, when I click on a chord, we should hear, usually we hear it previewed. Let me just make sure there's no automation. But usually it will preview the sound. Let me just make sure. Try it on another. So we can drag, so I'm not sure if you want to take a MIDI part, you could, it's not necessarily a right click, but you could also, if you go to your project, to chord track and say create chord events, that will automatically populate the chord track for you. I think usually, let me just add another instrument here quickly. I think usually it will kind of preview the sound. So let's see if I just come here. That's usually when selecting that it would preview. But if we just come over here, as we play, it'll trigger those chords on the instrument. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to accomplish with that. Or let me know if I'm misunderstanding, Gresham. And just see Jazz Dude reminding people that your Cubase and Cubase updates are 40% off currently until I think October 1st. All right, we see Michael Marshall joining from Somerset, UK. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're well. All right, so we see Gresham asks advice on how I can see the chord track icon in my audio file in the editor. All right, so like, we could see, the chord track here. So I'm not sure if you... So it's, so it may not show up in the sample editor, but let's say if I want to go to, we could actually, adjust the colors to follow the scale in chords. So we could actually see, different color schemes so that, green notes are within the chord. These notes, or in some notes, like redder notes will be out of the scale. Some will be in the scale, but not within the chord. So now we could see, just by the color of like a VariAudio editor, what's in the chord. But we don't, generally we don't see the chords in the sample editor. A lot of the sample editing is done in the lower zone where you can still kind of see the chords in, like as we play here, so you can see what the chords.
Afraid to smile, you think that I change my mind. I can't forget when we first met. What a story in your eyes.
So let me know if I'm misunderstanding, Gresham, if you want to see it. But, so the chord track is here, and if you want to see it within the particular, if you want to see the chord track functionality so that different tracks can follow the chord track, you can come over here. If you don't see it there, you could just go to Setup Sections, right click, and see that the chords are visible. So right click, Setup Sections, and then we could see, okay, we want to see the chord settings right there. If we're in the sample editor, since we could also, let's take a look at sections here. So we don't see the functions there, but when we click on the track, we can see the chord functions where we could have it follow the chord track or not. And the audio functions are going to be designed for monophonic. So if it's going to be like a guitar chord or piano chord, it won't do it. But you could have like, bass lines, vocals, automatically follow the chord track. See, Yak Martin says, how about a random LFO on pitch in Retrologue and then record, convert to audio, and then use pitch correct to extract MIDI notes, and then wowza. Yeah, so if you want to do something like that, we'll take a look at it here. Okay, so we'll come over here. Let's just go to... Let's do just a single oscillator here. That would change the pitch there. Let me just. Okay, so let's say we want to create alpha for that. So we'll come over here to our modulators. Okay, so let's come over here and restart. All right, so say I'll just sequence something here. And we could have this kind of and then even if I wanted to just do that in real time, I could come over here. Let's create an audio track. And we'll use our Retrologue as the input. So, but yeah, and then if you wanted to go into VariAudio, see what it looked like, it may not be the most musical thing, but it will give you kind of an idea. Then you could convert that into another MIDI part to play back. So all sorts of great stuff that you could do with modulators. All right, so we see Edge buyers. Edge again, can you show a detailed way of doing parallel so I can have compression on a vocal so I can have a better understanding? Okay, so let's come over here. Let's take this project and I'll just revert it. Okay, so say we have our vocal here. All right, so what parallel processing is going to allow you to do now, the traditional method, like if you wanted to follow the paradigm of like a recording console, what we would do is kind of we would add two groups. Okay, so we'll make these stereo groups, and on one of the groups we want to put a really heavy compression on it. So we'll come over here to an insert. Let's just choose like the stock compressor. All right, so I'm going to do like super heavy compression on one of the groups, but not the other group. And what we want to do is take this vocal track. I want to send it to this group that's not going to be compressed, and then also send it to this group, which is going to be compressed. So to do that, we would come over, go to our sends, and we want to say, okay, now we're going to send this to group 2 and group 3. And we could send kind of different amounts. So I'm going to just hold down Control or Command, and we'll set it to 0 dB out. So we go to our mix console. We have our two groups here. One is so now if I do the super compressed, all right, and I'll just increase the release time here. So that's really kind of super compressed. This one isn't. So what you want to do is kind of find the balance so that we could kind of have the natural sounding file here, but we still kind of get the benefits of having a compressed track so that we have that consistency. We blend those two. So that's without. Now when I bring this in, you want to find that sweet spot.
Something's wrong. We can't go on living a lie. How can I feel you? How can I see you?
And that's how we could kind of find that sweet spot between the balance. So that's kind of the traditional workflow following the paradigm of a recording console. But now a lot of times what we could do is the plugins themselves have kind of a wet dry mix that will provide kind of the same thing. So we'll come over and I'm going to, let's just open up this channel. All right, I'm going to take off the two groups. So when I go to like my tube compressor here, what we can do is we see a mix. So if this is set all the way to 100%, or if this is set to 0%, it's not going to be going through the compressor. So now we could set this in the middle and kind of blend. So a lot of the plugins now will give you kind of a mix parameter so that you could have kind of fully compressed, or it's blending the dry signal with the compressed, and that will give you kind of parallel processing. So you could do kind of the traditional way of kind of sending it to two groups, or just kind of if your plugin has a mix percentage, you could just use that and kind of blend in between the compressed and not compressed and find that kind of balance that makes sense for the particular performance. See, Ted Springman just says, thanks, Greg. Chord pads are now critical to my workflow. So, yeah. All right, sorry, Chatfield jumped to me. All right, so we see Dawid Jaeger says, I don't understand why the chords change keys if I already choose a root key. All right, so, if we come over, let's say we have, let me just come over here. So let's make a chord track here. So let's say my root key, I want to set it to the key of, so we'll come over, let's get to our project root key. All right, so if I come over here, we're going to set our project root key to G. So often the project root key is more to deal with when importing audio or MIDI loops that have, that basically have harmonic content and have a tonal key signature. So that way, if you are in the key of G and you import a loop that's in the key of A, it would automatically transpose down to G so that it's playing within the particular chords. So I'm going to take this particular file here again, and let's get to the project menu. Let's go to chord track, and we'll say, okay, let's create chord events. Okay, so we look at our chords, we could see this. Now, if I change my root key here, this is basically, so we say we change this to G, so, or from G to A, my chord tracks are still, going, this is independent. We could think of this as for when we're dealing with different loops that have kind of tonal centers. So let's say, okay, I want to come over and let's say synth bass. So when I come here, so let's say I have my root key in E now. So this is going to be more, the project root key is going to be primarily for importing audio files that have a project root key metadata. So most kind of all the included Steinberg content will have kind of the root key. It's a pretty standard metadata. So that whatever your root key is when you're auditioning loops. So now if I go to the key of A and we play, it's going to go up in pitch. It's going to modulate to match the project root key, but the project root key doesn't necessarily have an impact on the chord track. It's going to, you can set the project root key to the chord track so that when you import files that they will automatically import into the right key, but those two functions will work independently of each other. Okay. So Yak Martin just says that's what I want to see. Thanks, Greg. So you're welcome. Brightman Studio just says, hey, Greg, can you use multiple versions of Retrologue, or he says Retro Synth, I assume Retrologue, on several independent tracks, different sounds, or only used one track per song? Does that add to lots of latency? So you could have, multiple instances of the same of Retrologue. So let's say if I want to come here, I want to add, let's say 3 instrument tracks of Retrologue. So we'll come over, so we'll say, okay, Retrologue 1, I want to have, let's say, let's get a Retrologue 2. So I want to layer Retrologue 2 with and this Retrologue has an arpeggiator on it. And let's come over to this Retrologue. So you could stack multiple instances. So we'll just put like a strings patch on this one. So that's one note playing 3 different retrologs. So one note. So you could run multiple instances of Retrologue as long as your computer, you could probably run hundreds of them on a typical computer. So yeah, no problem doing that, Rick. All right, so we see Ted Springman just says, follow-up chord pad question, please. Say I randomly play pads and want to record results onto a MIDI track. Is there a simple way to parse out the notes onto separate tracks, 4-part harmony to 4 tracks? All right. Let's do new project here. Okay, so let's say we're just going to do like kind of generic. Okay, so let's come over, let's see, to our chord pads. All right, so I'm just going to come over here. All right, so I think come over, let's say we have our chords here and we want to kind of split these chords based on kind of their voices. So I think if we come over, let's see if we go to, might be under chord track. Okay, let's see if I had to add a chord track. There are several kind of logical editor presets where you could take the lowest voice and extract it to its own track, but I think that there's another way we could try as well. See if I remember how to do it. Okay, so I'm just going to drag those to my chord track. So let's say we want to go to voicings. May not be. Let me just see if I can. All right, so now that we've done that, we can see that we have, like, when we select here, we say soprano, alto, tenor, bass. So we see we have basically determined the SATB of that. And now I think if we go to the logical editor, we can come over here. Let me see if there's. So here we could choose to extract soprano voice. We come over here. Let's extract the alto. Let's extract tenor voice. So what you want to do is just say extract to track, type is equal to note, context variable equals voice tenor. So you could choose. And then let's do our bass voice, and you could assign those 4 into a macro, and then you could now have all the voices kind of automatically on separate tracks. So once you have a chord track, so once you record the MIDI, create a chord track, on those particular parts, you want to choose voicings from the chords menu here. Go into your logical editor, and you can make a macro to kind of do this for all of them at once. But go to your MIDI logical editor to set up. And you want to say we want to extract to track, type is equal to note. And you want to say the context variable is going to equal, and you want to choose voice. And then from there, you could choose your soprano, alto, tenor, bass, or soprano, alto, tenor, bass 2. And then you could just save a preset, or just simply say extract a voice, change this from soprano to alto, run the function again, and that way you could extract those voices to different tracks. Yak Martin says, oh yes, weird randomness to get stuff AI wouldn't think of. Yeah. All right, Nicholas Unic Gianlidis asks, hey man, absolutely love your videos. Cubase user here, 15 plus years professionally. Says, is Steinberg planning to implement seamless audio engine and splice integration soon? So generally we don't really comment on features ahead of time before release. So, but I know people have been asking for that. So I think that the seamless audio engine is improved over the years, and I think kind of the thinking is that when you do it, that instead of your tracks playing out of time, like when you know, sometimes it's seamless and all your tracks are playing out of time until you stop in other DAWs, and then it's the delay compensation is correct. But what I think the Steinberg engine is doing is just simply, you know, resetting all of the latency so that everything that you hear is in time. So it may seem like a little glitch, but you know, it may seem like a little interruption, but that's actually kind of resetting all the latency compensation as well. So currently there is like a Splice VST3 plugin. It kind of makes it function like MediaBay that many people have told me, but we'll see what future versions have coming. All right, Michael Sullivan asks, is it possible to break out individual instruments in Groove Agent, Percussion Agent? So let's take a look. Okay, so let's open up a percussion agent here. All right, so if you want them kind of broken out into like individual notes, so say if I drag this pattern over, you know, what we could do, so if I have that pattern, and if I wanted the MIDI on different notes, what I could do is just come over here, and I will say, let's go to your MIDI menu, and we will choose Dissolve Part, and I'll say Separate Pitches, and now every one of the tracks is on its own. So. Now, if you want to kind of hear, if you want to, like, you know, create separate audio files, what you need to do is to go to the mixer here, and we can say, okay, I want this going out of output 2, this to output 3, output 4, out 5, and we have 32 stereo outs, 6, 7, 8. All right, so now that I have these all kind of being spread out to different outputs, I can see all my kind of outputs here, that now I could go to, let's say, my edit menu, and let's go to freeze, or render in place rather. We'll come over here, and I'll just choose, I think we need to choose complete signal path. And let me see if I check my settings here real quick. It should follow kind of the main outputs. Let me just... But generally, once you have this done, let me just try one more time, just to try the track as opposed to the event. generally once you, yeah, so now that we had that, so now each of the tracks here will be rendered as independent audio files that you can see. So you could use the, so, you know, set the routing in the mixer to different outputs if you want to render audio, and then you could just simply choose to, that would split it, and if you wanted them on separate MIDI tracks, just choose dissolve part and separate pitches. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Michael. All right, Quellen asks, which operating system is working Cubase the best, Mac or Windows, and does it need performance computers like a gaming PC? So a lot of times, you know, having a high-powered graphics card doesn't help a lot with your Cubase functions, and sometimes, you know, high-powered graphics cards designed for games can have adverse effects on audio performance. So to me, I go back and forth between Mac and PC every single day. I have a Mac for work. What I personally purchased is a PC for myself, and both of them work great. You know, my standard answer to which operating system is best is that they're both amazingly great and they both suck in some ways. So, you know, it's not such a clear winner. You know, there's a lot of people excited about Apple Silicon, but, you know, then you could be tripped up. Like, you know, I had a friend who's had an operating system update, and we had to set a kernel extension for his audio interface. It's like the most buried thing in Mac OS. So there's sometimes like security things that are really unobvious. Like, you know, it could shut down your audio system if you didn't give, like, you know, you're kind of giving microphone permissions, you know, for, like, you know, talking over Zoom or FaceTime, and that affects your audio system for your digital audio workstation. So stuff like that that's seemingly unrelated. So it's really a toss-up. It's really just a personal preference. Cubase runs great on Windows. It runs great on Mac. We work very hard to be optimized to take advantage of all the latest processing technology. So even if you're doing like Snapdragon X processors, Windows on ARM, or you're doing Apple Silicon, or you're doing just, you know, 64-bit Windows, Cubase runs great on all of them. So if you like one over the other, you know, you'll be in great shape. All right, wonderful to see Nick checking in from Essex. Has got here to press the like button. Got to go. Hope you have a great week, Cubase family. So thanks for checking in, and hope to see you maybe on his Zoom social at the end of the month. All right, Mutlu. Sorry, my chat just jumped. All right, Mutlu Odomis asks, hi Greg, how can we easily cycle marker selected events? Okay. So what you could do is, like, so let's say we have events here. So if we want to make a cycle marker, so let's say we have a marker track. Okay, so we'll just add a marker track. All right, so, you know, and, you know, what you could do is hit the letter P and then just click on this icon here for cycle markers. So P and that icon. Now, if you wanted to make a macro, that's like a great thing to make a macro for. So let's say I want to make a macro and assign that from my MIDI remote to make a cycle marker from the event. So we're going to do two things. So macro is just a series of keyboard shortcuts. So let's take a quick look. Come over here. So let's go to our key commands. And we want to, we'll see new macro. All right, and I'm just going to double click. We'll give it a name. So we'll say create cycle marker from event. Okay, so I want to, so we know P is like locators to range. I'm just going to click on the little keyboard here, hit the letter P, and then I'm going to add that command. And then we're going to type insert cycle marker. Okay, so let's add cycle marker on the active track. So I'm going to add that command. All right, so now when I come over here and I run this macro, I can now, you see that that cycle marker has been added. So if I wanted to take a knob on, so I could assign a keyboard shortcut to this of my, and it will execute that macro, which is those 2 steps. Or if we want to come over, let's go to our MIDI remote, and I want to assign this button to do it. We can just say, okay, CCLS, and we'll go under macros. So we'll say create cycle marker from event. And I want this to be done from this knob. So now this knob on my MIDI remote will do that function for me. So I select the event, and the macro is automatically created for me based on the selected event. So let me know if that's helpful for you. And thanks for joining us today, Mutlu. Right, Yak Martin just says, I'm always astounded at what's in the box. Recently watched a documentary on Meshuggah on YouTube, and their first recordings only had amp rack on the guitars. Yeah, so they actually did a bunch of the presets that you see for the amp rack. So I'll have to watch that video. I know I've met the guys before at NAMM show. I come by, said hi. All right, so we see Michael Graybills wishing everyone well today from Dallas. Thanks for joining. All right, so FlyV just says, I heard you say 3 licenses for Cubase on separate PCs or laptops is allowed. So yeah, when you have your Cubase 12, 13, or 14 license, you could run that on up to, you could have it installed and active on 3 separate computers. So if you have your home studio computer, maybe a work computer, and a laptop, you could have Cubase activated on all of those machines. If you need it to, if you're away, like let's say you're at a studio and they're not smart enough to have Cubase, what you could do is, and you're there, you could log in with your with your Steinberg account, deactivate one of your licenses on a computer remotely if you need to. Deactivate it remotely from the web page of your Steinberg account. You could temporarily, you could activate your license on a studio computer, do your work, and then deactivate the studio computer when you leave. So you could have 3 licenses at once, but you could have it on multiple machines, but just not active. So yeah. All right, so we see from FlyV says, I have my extra PC, but it only uses Cubase LE. How do I use separate licenses and boost up to Cubase Pro on both? So all you need to do is, go to your activation manager. So when you come over here, you'll see the Steinberg activation manager. So if you install your Cubase on the other machines, log in here with your activation manager with your My Steinberg credentials, and then you could just choose to activate directly right there, and then that machine will, it'll at that point, I think you need to be online for that process, but not afterward. But at that point, you could just simply be running Cubase on your other machines. So just go to your activation manager and turn it on, and then you're good to go. So we see from Rick at Bratman Studios, says Retrologue is 3 different instruments. Would I do that by each on a different MIDI channel then? So it's not a multi-timbral instrument, but it's not a multi-timbral instrument, but in essence, every time you load an instrument, it's its own MIDI port. So once you add an instrument, it's like if you had, instead of 1 Korg M1, you have 3 Korg M1s. So you open a 4th instance of Retrologue, it's like getting a 4th Korg M1. So you have MIDI ports, and you could choose whatever MIDI channel you want. So they could all be on the same channel. You could put them on different channels if you want. So, but when you open a VST instrument, it's like it automatically creates a new MIDI port, and each port has 16 MIDI channels. So it's kind of like virtual MIDI interfaces. Okay. See, Jazzy just mentioned 5 or 6 Retrologues with Roland Lag, Sawtooths, and Unison mode is great. The one great trick that a lot of people don't know about Retrologue, we'll show you here. So let's add, let's say we want to do a quick Retrologue. So, a lot of instruments will just have like multiple oscillators, but your oscillator that you have here, and so let's say if we come over to our Retrologue here. All right, so if we put this instead of a single to a multi-oscillator, one of the things that you'll see here is you could have the number of multi-voices. So let's say I go from 1 to 4. So instead of having like 4 oscillators to do that, but now if we also come over here and do like a slight detune. So you get that from one single oscillator. So if I wanted to add a second oscillator, put it into multi again, and let's just put let's knock this down an octave. And again, we'll set our number of voices. We'll try 3 here. So just in a matter of seconds, you could get like super thick from just, a single oscillator or combining 2 oscillators in multi-mode with a slight detuning. So that way you may not have to stack as many Retrologues to kind of get that monster sound. So if you haven't played with that, check that out. Okay, so we see from, I think it's Dawi Dejager, or I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. It says, thank you, that makes sense. You're welcome. Okay, so Uno Memento says we are close to the 100th like, so whack the like button. see Yak Martin just saying it's good trivia in case you weren't aware. But if you watch a video, Killed the Radio Star, the guy playing the Moog modular in the back is kind of a young Hans Zimmer. So it's kind of interesting. Good trivia. All right, reading through comments. Yak Martin says, Greg, are you from some native tribe and your official name is Man Who Knows All Buttons? It's probably Man Who's Made Mistake Before Others is probably more accurate. So, but I try to learn stuff all the time. Thank you for the kind words. All right, Michael Sullivan just says, perfect, just what I wanted. All right, so we see Graham Witchers joined us from Oxford. Thanks for joining. Okay, so we see from Boyd Pro, says, hi PC, Cubase 14 Pro. What is the proper best way to save a current project as a completely new project that copies everything over to a separate new project folder as well? It says, thank you for being here. So the function that does that already is if you just choose backup project from the file menu. So if we just kind of come right over here, and I probably haven't saved this one. So let me go to a project that's so if we have like audio files that are kind of all over the place and we want to consolidate everything, what we do is just come here to backup project. It's going to ask us to define a new folder. So we can come over here. I'll just put it on my desktop. And then we get prompted, we give it a name. So we'll say, okay, it's comping C14. And I'll just put we have the choice to come over here we could keep the current project open. We can minimize audio files, make direct offline processing permanent. So we could kind of render files. We could choose not to back up the video or the mix down folder. So, and then just hit OK. And then everything is going to be backed up into that particular folder. So we'll come over to desktop and here's our September 16th. We have our project file. Can you saw where I added the date to the name, the mix down folder, all of my audio files are there, images, and everything we need is going to be directly within that particular folder. So again, just come over here and choose backup project and choose a new folder, and all the files will just be copied to that new folder as an archive or backup. Okay. Okay, so we see Flyv just says, like I said earlier, my old laptop is garbage. It's slow and glitches. HD runs at 100%. I think I may stay accustomed to bringing my new Windows 11 with me in my new bag. So. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so Mootlu just says, thank you, Greg. It's very useful. Glad it helped. All right, so we see from Bratman Studio, it just says, thanks, Greg. I always wonder why my master keyboard could be on MIDI channel 1 on each new track and not play all at the same time. Yeah, so just to show you, so let's say if we add, let's say we add some instrument tracks, so we'll add a Retrologue, let's add a pad shop, or we'll add a pad shop, then a Retrologue again. Okay, and let's say I add a MIDI track. All right, so now this MIDI track, I could send it to 16 MIDI channels on any of these particular instruments. So none of these are really multi-timbral, but when I go to this MIDI track, we could go to its routing, and then we could just say, okay, do I want to send this to Retrologue, Pad Shop, Retrologue, or Groove Agent? So each of these ports, you know, so in the old days, Rick, if you had like a mid-X interface or a Mode 2 MIDI interface where you had 8 in and 8 out, you know, we always struggled to, if you had a large MIDI rig, it's like, I'm going to use channels 1 through 8 on this instrument, channel 10 for this drum machine, channel 9 for a piano module, channel 11 through 16 on this module, and that would all fit on one MIDI port, and you'd have to kind of plan it out. But now anytime you add a virtual instrument, it's its own virtual MIDI port with 16 MIDI channels. Okay. All right, so Roland Stuff says, hi Greg, I'm trying to make the duration of a long sequence of MIDI notes identical. I think there's a simple way to do that. Isn't there? I just can't remember how. Okay, so let's take a look. Here, I'll just mute that to be less annoying. All right, so let's say we have all these MIDI notes here, and okay, so I want all these to be the same length. Okay, so I think if I select it here, so let's say I want these all to be, I'm just going to type in all right, let me just okay, so I'm going to go to bars and beats. So let's say I want all these to be all right, so I'm going to select all these notes. All right, so I think if I go to my length setting here, I'll just say 1. right. So now each of these notes are now the same length. So what you want to do, I'll undo that. So let's select all the notes. So just Command A, go to the length field here. And then you could just say, okay, I want these to be 4. I'm going to type in 4. Hold down Control or Command. And now each of those notes we could have be, 4 beats, 4 measures long. So you could just, when you go to the length field here, we could just say, okay, I want it to be 0.4.0.0. Hold down, before we hit enter, hold down Command or Control. And now they're all the same length. So again, just select them all. Go to your field here. You could also, let's see, there's probably also like a fixed length function. We could fix velocity. Let's see if you wanted to go into the logical editor, we could say we want to transform MIDI notes and we want to adjust their length and we want it to set to a fixed value. And here we could just say, okay, I want it to be, and we could choose different time frames. So let's say, okay, I want this to be 2 beats or 2 measures. So now you could adjust your length like that. So let me know if that's helpful for you. But just kind of like what we could do on, if we have all of our velocities different and I want all the velocities to be the same, I could just come right over here, double click in the velocity field, type in 108, hold down Control or Command, and now all the values are set to the same value. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Okay, we have a question from Channel Ripoff. It says, hey G, I need to export like 15 tracks. Some are audio, some are instruments. All 15 tracks are going to 5 different buses, then out the master with plugins, need stems, and 2 sends of the 15 tracks. How? Okay. All right, let me see if I have. Actually, I'll just do a different project here real quick. Okay, so let's say I have MIDI here. All right, so I'm going to just do a quick hit points. All right, now I'm going to just add some MIDI data to it. Okay, so we have MIDI. Let's add a effect send here. Okay, I want all my drums going to a group. So I'm going to come over here. Let's add a group track to the drums. Okay, so let's say we have MIDI, we have effects, we have groups here. And let's say on our group, we want to put, you know, say an envelope shaper. All right, so now we want to make stems. All right, so Cubase is really great for this because what we do, and we have, let's say, our reverb. All right, let me go to the guitar parts here, make sure we have the sends. All right, so to do this, we want to go to your file to export audio mixdown. Okay, and then we want to click on multiple. So once we click on multiple, we could choose to include the inserts and channel strips if you want, or we can make it disabled if you want to include the groups or the master effects. And we want to say, okay, I want my stereo out mix. I want to have my drum group, so I could select all my groups. We'll choose our reverence independently. Let's choose our drums, our MIDI drums, and we want to choose all of our audio tracks. All right, now after we do this, I want it to create a new project. Okay, and I'm going to set my audio. I'm going to set my left and right locators around all of the audio here so that we could export the entire thing. So, and let's say here in the middle, I'm just going to mute. I'm going to erase a bass part in the middle so we could see if it has a hole in the exported file. So again, go to export audio mixdown. We could choose what sample rate, what bit depth, what file format, and we could actually have multiple scenarios. So I want to do this. We're going to, after it's done, let's create a new project. So I'm going to say export audio mixdown. This is the feature that we added it, I think, in 12. All of the film composer assistants were like, thank you so much. Because it just kind of automates the entire process for them. Then, so, and once we have this done, we'll see that all the stems will be rendered with our groups, effects, automation, our MIDI will all be rendered as audio. Getting there. All right, and now to kind of test, we'll come over here. And here are stems, so we could test. So if we want to see like our bass part, we look at it, we'll see this is where we made that cut. Let's listen to our, so everything is now the group effect. So we have kind of like our stereo out if we want. We could also have these mono down mixed. So overheads, let's listen to our guitar. So we could just kind of if we want to listen to. So this way we could have just a kick from our trigger. So everything is now rendered as audio, and now everyone could put it into the project window at the same, start all the files at the same time, and have no worries. So again, export audio mixdown. We'll make this the active project. Select everything, and I chose to do mono down mix. You could choose interleaved if you want. So let me know if that makes sense. All right. All right, let's see. All right, Yak Martin says, don't forget to demonstrate the drum machine might inspire old and new users. All right, so if you haven't played around with the drum machine, it was introduced in 14. There's all sorts of great stuff that we could do with it. So we could actually now come over here and have a drum track. So, and then we could have this load into a MIDI part or into a pattern event. So a lot of times with the drum tracks, there's cool stuff that you could do. So I could choose, like, just come over here, double click, and we could have kind of a synthesizer for playing like our bass sound. And so we have kind of a drum synthesizer. So we could drop samples in as well. But if we wanted to come over here, if we want to adjust, let's say a snare here. So we could select snare. And now that we have our snare pad selected, we could so if you want like more decay, more of the click, more noise, kind of blend it in, and let's put a quick hi-hat. And so let's say maybe we want to replace that hi-hat. All right, and if we wanted to put in samples as well, all we would have to do is come over and say, okay, I want so I could also just have synthesis and samples combined. So now if we want to quickly program something, I could come over here and we have a pattern editor. We could choose like 16 or 24 steps, 32 steps. And now when I just kind of hit play, we could just say, okay, I want to. And if I wanted to kind of put in like another hit, but just adjust the velocity down a little bit. Then I could even kind of come over here to my closed hi-hat, and we could just say, okay, put in like every fourth. And then if I wanted to come here, we could just put in So we have different controller lanes, because if I want to come over here and say, and we could also control kind of other different parameters. Let's say I go back to my drum machine here and I want to adjust the decay. I could right click on this parameter and just say, let's go to the pattern editor. And now I get to have my decay on the kick. So I could say, okay, I want this decay to be softer, that to be really short, and that one to be longer decay. And we could also have some other stuff, like I want to come over here, let's put in some hi-hats, and I want these to, you know, do probability, so every like 40% of the time I want those to play. And let's come over here, just and then if I wanted to put like a snare repeat, we could just kind of come right over here and we could choose repeats and how many times you want that to repeat. And then just kind of going back to the drum machine here, you know, we could come over and add different pad effects as well as group effects. We could have, you know, 32 stereo outputs. So all sorts of great stuff that you could do with the drum machine and pattern editor working together. All right. Thanks for asking that. All right. Uno Memento says we got 100 likes. Have a nice week, everyone. See you on Friday. All right, so Maddie Wen says, can a drum machine or Groove Agent import file formats used by other samplers that have a great set of samples by samples from Mars, but redoing every preset they give for Cubase is going to be tedious. So if you have Groove Agent, so Groove Agent can import Akai MPC files. So I think what you need to do, let me see if I have one still. I think I downloaded like an MPC kit. But you could just kind of drag and drop. See if it's on. But you can just kind of drag and drop like an MPC. I think it's a PGM file. So you could just drag and drop it onto the Groove Agent here, and that will automatically be carried over into Groove Agent and convert it for you. So if it's set up for like an MPC file format, you could load those directly into Groove Agent quite easily. All right, Roland Sub says, thanks, Greg. I forgot about using the control key before setting the MIDI note lengths. That solved it for me. As you often say, I was just one mouse click away from happiness. Maybe one keyboard click in that instance, but glad it did the trick. All right, Maddie Wen says it's a lot of WAV files, but they come formatted for things like Ableton and Battery. I was hoping Cubase would low-key read contact files or something, and then it would make it easier. So if you have contact files that aren't copy, that don't have kind of digital rights protection in them, then you could import them into Halion. But a lot of times Akai is a pretty common file format for transferring drum kits. So if it comes in Akai files, as you just mentioned, you could just simply import it right into. Let me see. I'll take one more look, see if I could find. I guess I did it just recently. Let me see if it's maybe. I think it's PGM. So let me look for. Here's my MPC kit here. So I have all these samples. All right, so let me open up my Groove Agent here. Okay, so here's the PGM file. So I want to drag it over and so see if you have it in MPC as well. So all right. All right, you see channel ripoff just saying thanks, Greg. So you're welcome. All right, channel ripoff asks, did you get the master plugin chain on all those tracks as well with that export? So if you're doing the export audio mixdowns, let me just go back to that file here. You do have the option to include the master. So if we get to your file, we could do the export audio mixdown. So if you wanted to include your master groups and sends. So if you have limiter or, on the master bus, you could include that and have that rendered into all of the individual tracks as well. So FlyV says, if I were to say use Cubase Pro on a separate laptop, would Cubase Pro start on multiple laptops, or would I have to allow the license one at a time? I think technically the license agreement says use for one at a time, but I think that you could use it. I don't think there's anything that's really actively checking to see if you have it open on two machines simultaneously. So I think you're fine, but officially you're supposed to run it on one computer at a time with the license. All right, so channel ripoff says, I'm also trying to export all the stems to an external folder. Descent in our producer uses a different DAW. So yeah, when you're working with stems, just, when you do this, you could actually choose your path here. So, at this point, you could choose a network folder if you want to put on, at our corporate office, we have Ignite. If you want to save it to Dropbox or save it to a separate folder on a hard drive, you could just simply have the exported stems go to any location you want just by setting the path here. All right, so we see Edge Buyers. It says, thanks, Greg. Thanks for being a part of the live stream today. All right, so we see Yak Martin just says, thanks, Greg, for the new drum thingy. Is easier for folks who come from elsewhere. I also find it less complicated interface in Groove Agent. So, you know, when you have more functions in a particular tool, it is more complicated, you know, by its nature of having more features. But I think it's good not to dumb down Groove Agent and lose its power features, but still have something that's very accessible, and not try to make the drum machine into Groove Agent and Groove Agent into the drum machine. You know, we could use both of them together very easily, but they're kind of, you know, different workflows a lot of times, especially with the synthesis capabilities in the new drum machine. All right, we see Gareth that says it's bedtime for him. Thanks for joining us. My best to you and Lola. All right. Noisefield says he loves the drum machine plus sequencer and Cubase 14. Just awesome. All right, we see Michael Pierce just dropping in before he hops in the car. You might get home in time to continue on, but thanks for popping in, Michael. Hope you're well. All right, so we see from Maddie Wen says, pretty sure it came with MPC presets, so that's definitely something I'll be able to try. All right, reading through comments here. See, Yak Martin says, I bought me a cute little Arturia Keylabs, and now I now know what to do with bundled Akai samples. All right. Okay, so we see Flyv says, okay, thanks again. Hope today went well for everyone. All right, see Kerwin Young says, it's always great to learn. New game here with Greg Undo. Thank you, Greg. I'll catch you again. We got another free day. So we hope that academic life is treating you well. All right, so we have SF Bud says, thanks, Greg, as always, for dropping some excellent Cubase knowledge piece from San Francisco. So thanks for joining us. And I think I'll be out like the weekend of November 15th at the Music Expo in San Francisco, so we get a chance to check it out. All right, Bratman Studio says, Greg, I'm having a great time playing with Retrologue 2. Got the pitch bend and mod wheel working great. If I want to send you just the new sound, is there a way to do that? So you could save it as a preset. So if you have like presets, and if you want to share presets, what you could do, we'll come over here. Let's add. So let's say we come over to our Retrologue. So we'll add an instrument track. All right, so say I've modified my new all right, so if you just come over here, you see this little drop down, you could say preset. So we'll call it Bratman Studio 1. All right. So all you have to do now, if you want to find your preset, if you go to your MediaBay, and then you want to say, okay, I'm going to use your presets for VST instruments, and you could just say, oh, here's Bratman Studio. And then if you want to like send that preset in the email to someone, so you could right click on that location and say reveal in Finder, and then it'll take you directly to that preset that you could share with other people. So if you have some great presets, you know, feel free to share. Maybe we can put them in the Cubase Nation Discord. You can share them with Jazz Dude so everyone could have access to it as well. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely checking in from Martinez, California. He's lurking at the back of the class, but paying attention. Paul Claridge says, Greg, this live chat is the best feature of Cubase. Well, I try to help and represent what the incredible team at Steinberg create so that we could all, you know, realize our creativity. So, but thank you for the kind words. It means a lot. So Jazz Dude says, yes, we have up to 10 megabyte direct upload available in Discord. So if you have like presets, it'd be great to share them there. All right. All right, I know we had a couple questions that were mailed in, so let's get to those. All right, so we see Rick says, great, thanks. He's going to make a library of sounds. Can't wait to hear what you develop. Okay, so we had a question. How can I add the name SW_ARP_ to all events on a selected track? Okay, so let's do a new project here. We'll just make some events. Okay, I'll just put a little space here. Okay, so we want to add just on selected tracks we want to kind of add a prefix for SW_ARP_ to events on the selected track. So I'm going to have this top event selected here, and then I'll have this track not selected. So let's go over to our project logical editor. And we want to transform, and we want to say our media type, we'll say our container type is going to be an event. And to make it on the selected track and not all events, we're going to say our property is set to parent object is selected. In this case, the parent object is the track. So if the track is selected, all the children on that track will be, that is what's going to be targeted to do. So we're now saying we want to select all the events on this track, and that's what we do in the event target filters. And then what we're going to do to those particular events, we set up here in the middle. So we're going to choose to say, let's come over here, let's go to name, and we want to prepend. And we're going to say just standard names. You could put the date, time, date plus time, or renumber. So I'm going to say or just get it right. So SW_ARP_. So if I did this right, every event in this track that we see kind of named Pad Shop 01, when I come over here, we'll say apply. And let's see if I... All right, let me see if I set this to... Yeah, so I'm going to say media type is equal to MIDI. And we could also say audio or audio. So now we come over here. So we're going to say media type is equal to MIDI. And then we could say or audio. And the parent object is selected. And then, so it's going to take either the MIDI or the audio events, and then on the selected channel, and then we're going to go to name, prepend, and it's SW underscore ARP underscore. So as soon as we do this, boom. So if I select the track below and run the same thing, we'll see that the first track, since its track isn't selected, won't change the name. So we come over here, and now we can see that name, we'll call it prefix, has been added. So we prepended that particular name over to that file of the name of the event. All right, so next question. How to control multiple parameters with a single MIDI knob or fader. Okay, so let's say we have a Retrologue. We'll just make one here. And on this Retrologue track, I want to have maybe an EQ. So I want to come over to my frequency EQ, and I want to be able to kind of sweep this EQ. We'll adjust our Q, make it a little more narrow. I want to be able to adjust maybe the volume at once. So if we go under tools, we'll see a volume plugin. Okay, and I want to be able to adjust the panning. So let's say I want to adjust my volume, EQ, panning, and maybe we'll do one more parameter on the channel itself. So let's say we want to do like one of the like compressors. So we'll go to our channel strip. Okay, so I want to be able to adjust the threshold here. So let's say our ratio. So I want to control the ratio, the EQ, the volume, and panning and have it from one knob on my MIDI remote. So to do this, what we could do is just come over. Let's go to our MIDI remote. So I'm just going to say I want this particular knob to control. So we're going to set it up in our modulators. And the first thing we want to do is a macro knob. So I'm going to take this. So let's adjust my EQ frequency. So I'm going to click here on the plus. I want to come over here. So let's do the frequency instead. Sorry. So I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, so click on the plus sign, and then I could adjust the frequency. All right, now I want to also control the volume plugin. So we'll open up our volume plugin. All right, so so now we move this knob. Both of those parameters are going to move. I want to adjust the panning of the track. So Again, I just kind of could click right here, adjust the panning, and the compression threshold. So we'll come over here, open up the track. All right, and we go to our compressor. So let's just say our threshold, or ratio will adjust here. So now, when I move these parameters, when I move this one knob, all these parameters are going to adjust. So let me just come over here. So we can see our panning. All right, so now to control this with my MIDI remote, I would just right click and say MIDI remote, pick for remote mapping. I move my knob and click apply. And now when I move my one knob on my MIDI remote, it is now controlling my macro modulator. So I can see my volume, my EQ frequency, my panning, and let's open up the channel strip here. And now we could see multiple parameters, 4 different parameters, all being controlled from one single knob. So you could use the macro modulator, and from there control the macro modulator with the MIDI remote. All right, let's jump back to more questions. Thanks for all the great questions. Again, you can always mail questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay. Okay. All right, Bratman Studio is just asking Jazzy, what's the MLE/PLE? So those are the MIDI Logical Editor and Project Logical Editor presets. All right, so you see a question from Bratman Studio. It says, who's mixing with a subwoofer or mastering with a subwoofer in their studios? So I have a friend, Bob Bullock, who's kind of a really highly regarded engineer. He's based in Nashville, super great guy. He's worked with Kenny Rogers for a number of years. He was an assistant on Steely Dan Asia. You know, he was an engineer on Shania Twain's big, huge record with Mutt Lange. And, you know, he has kind of an interesting system with his subwoofers. And I noticed this also with my late friend Tom Size, who's working out of the Bay Area, who did, you know, Sammy Hagar, you know, he did I Can't Drive 55, and, you know, a whole bunch of, you know, I think he worked with Journey, just all kind of the big Bay Area acts, wonderful engineer. And both of them would run a subwoofer, you know, if they had, you know, for their setups. They would both have subwoofers for each frequency, for each speaker. So they had a left sub and a right sub, and they just kind of used it as an extension for their particular speaker. And then they found that they had a lot less kind of phase issues, that, you know, they just had kind of like a left and right channel, and the sub was part of that, you know, and it would have its own crossover so that, you know, the phase relationships were maintained. So some people I know that are very particular will tend to do that, and they have a left and right speaker output, and each speaker contains an LFE sub so that they don't have to worry about kind of phase issues with having one sub and 2 speakers. All right, let's see if we have any other questions that sneak in. I think we may have one more question that was mailed in. Let me just check. All right. Let me just get to my document. Oh, yeah. How to use the Flexphraser in Halion Sonic 7. All right, so this is a great little hidden gem that a lot of people may not know about it. So if you're not like the best keyboard player in the world, you can come over. So let's go to Halion Sonic. All right, so I want to load up, let's say, kind of like a whirly piano, right? So I don't really play piano well. So if I was trying to play something, I'm just not a keyboard player. Missed that day of school. All right, so, but if we go to Edit, and then we go to the program, we could see this thing called a Flexphraser. So we could activate it. And this is like a really slick arpeggiator, because what I could do now is come over here and let's say I just want piano and keyboard presets, and you can see there's lots of presets. So let's say, okay, I want maybe electric piano presets. So now when I play a chord, if you look, I'm just holding down a C major chord here. It will now automatically now I could have this, this arpeggio kind of do, okay, I want it to be maybe eighth note triplets instead. So when I play a chord, or if you want to be 16th notes, and we could, since we could have 16 different voices here, and we could say, okay, I want this to swing more. So you could kind of adjust the timing. Now let's say I want to load up a different sound. So I want to make a layer inside of Halion. So I want to come over, let's do like a plucked instrument. Let's do like an acoustic guitar. All right, so let's say we want to do like maybe a nylon guitar here. So sometimes some presets, you may notice that when you play, may already have arpeggiators kind of built into them. So I'm going to go over here to my MIDI, and let's just mute this. I'm going to put this on channel 1 also, so that so I could just come over here and kind of play different chords. So now when I just play a chord, but if I wanted to layer both of these together, I could come over and let's add like maybe a string patch in there. So let's come over. Let's say we want a string patch. All right, so I'll mute these and let's find a quick string arpeggio. So put this on channel 1. All right, so let's say we'll do like a quick pizzicato. So now when we come over to edit, we'll select our strings, activate this, and you have all sorts of great presets that come with this. So as soon as we want to say, okay, we want to come over, let's go to our phrase. So you can see, okay, you want house, Latin, do you want strings? So let's say, okay, I want general, let's do some pizzicato. So now we could have kind of these three different arpeggios. And just playing simple chords, we could come up with really interesting parts without a lot of effort. So that's always a lot of fun. So if you haven't played around with the Flexphraser, check it out, because there's all sorts of great phrases in there to use as kind of the basis for, you know, coming up with great musical ideas. Okay. Michael Team says he has 2 subs in his studio. All right, so see if there's any more questions that sneak in. We'll give it a minute here. If not, we'll wrap up just a few minutes early. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. Given our 30 seconds, then there's usually a delay from when I speak to when you guys hear. Give it another 10 seconds or so, see if there's any other questions. And thanks for all the great questions. I hope that everyone who had questions got their questions answered, and other people have learned from others' questions. All right, give it another just a little bit and we'll wrap up. All right, Michael Teams wants everyone to have a great, safe week and make some great music. Great to see Capital Razor on. Okay, so it looks like we are out of questions. Thanks everyone for all the great questions that were sent in. Appreciate it. Always grateful to be part of the community here, and you know, it's real, you know, incredibly rewarding and satisfying that if I was able to help people along their Steinberg journey. Appreciate everyone forming this great community, and we'll be back on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and then. But look forward to seeing everyone. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back on Friday. Goodbye.